Welcome back from a rainy day in Abbey. Yeah, it hasn't been a rainy day here in a while. All right, so I want to talk about my favorite player on each team, keeping in mind that favorite is not necessarily best. This is a conversation I've had for years on this channel where I will say my favorite player is, insert name here, and people will say, well, that's stupid. Why isn't your favorite player, insert name of MVP here? Because a player being an MVP of the team is great, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be your favorite player. To me, that's a weird standard that everybody's favorite player should be the same guy, or else you're out of the fan club. So when looking at 32 rosters before this video, I had to go through and say, all right, so who is my favorite player on each team? And some of these are names you've seen in videos before when I've talked about my favorite players. That should be how this works. In some cases, it might have changed from where it was, say, a year ago or a couple of years ago. But we'll start things off with Montreal. It really hasn't changed for Montreal at all. My favorite player out of Montreal, still, Nick Suzuki. Absolute steal out of Vegas. I think the two-way center role for him is just, he is perfectly suited for it. I think the sky is the limit, and yeah, I'm a huge fan of Suzuki. So if I had to get a jersey for each team is kind of what I'm looking at when I do this. Like, okay, if I was going to get a guy's name on the back of each jersey, which one would I get? And right now with Montreal, it would be Suzuki. It's close between he and Caulfield, but I would go with Suzuki. Florida, I went kind of back and forth, but I realized, you know what? Yeah, it's Barkov. I do have a Huberdeau jersey, which all of a sudden, well, he's in Calgary, but if it makes anybody feel better, I also have a Tkachuk in Calgary jersey, so I guess we could take the name and number off one and move it to the jersey, and that way we've busted two jerseys. All right, so Barkov is one of those forwards that just goes beast mode. And I really do like players who can play keep away with the puck. Make it look easy. Make it look like they're playing against junior age players. And when Barkov's on and he's on a hot streak, he can do that. So Barkov is my favorite member of the Florida Panthers. Pittsburgh, this one's a little dicey. So I downloaded the Sports Forecaster Annual for this year. They're not doing a print copy. And according to their digital copy in their lineup, they don't project Blueger to make the lineup. They don't have Blueger in the top four lines. Now, I love Teddy Blueger. I have a Teddy Blueger jersey. There's no guarantee that Blueger is going to make the team necessarily, but if in the event that Pittsburgh didn't slot him into one of those top four center roles, I would think that somebody would look at him if he became available for trade. And I only say that because I was flabbergasted that he wasn't projected to be in their lineup. But again, projections are just that. And so I don't have a comment section to make a comment. This is as close as I'm going to get. Tampa Bay. With Tampa, this is an example of sometimes the best player is also the one that I like the most. I think Victor Hedman's the best player on Tampa. You can make an argument for Stamkos, Point, Kucherov, Vasilevsky. There's a reason this team's won a couple of Stanley Cups and they're looking for another. Hedman is, for my money, still the best defenseman of this generation right now. And I say right now because Makar is definitely knocking on that door. Although if would we qualify a generation in hockey as 10 years, or would that be a 20 thing? Do you look at a 20-year generation? And if it is 10 years, then is Hedman's generation on the way out and is Makar's on the way in? It's a whole other discussion. But Hedman, to me, is still a defenseman that if I have a lead to protect late, I want Hedman out there if he's on my team, and I'm willing to play him for a minute and a half, 2-minute long shift, and I'm not worried about it. Hedman is a fantastic defenseman. For Dallas, honestly, over the last 12 months, I had to put Robertson. Now, Rope Hintz absolutely could have gone up here, right? Ottinger, yep, could have put Ottinger up here. There have been times where it would have been Jamie Benn. It's not now. It's Robertson. And Pavelski is up there, but Robertson is this electrifying player who can kind of sort of do everything out there, and I think that we've just started to scratch the surface about what Robertson can do. I think there's a 50-goal season there. There might even be a 100-point season there at some point, but it's Dallas, so we'll accept 80. 80 points we'll accept. We're fine. 80 points is great. Thank you. So Robertson, excellent forward. Really like the player. For Minnesota, I don't even need to look at what I wrote down for Minnesota, because if I don't write Kaprizov, there's a problem. So this is one of those instances where it is the best player on the team, and he's electrifying, and he is fun to watch. He is it feels like every single shift he does something special and fun to. He's just so much fun to watch, and I really like Kirill quite a bit. I'm glad he's back in the United States right now. We don't have to worry about, is he going to be able to get out of Russia? Is he not? No problem. He's in the U.S. and he's going to play this year. And he's really, honestly, he is the Minnesota Wild this year, with the cap problems they've had and the moves they've had to make. I think the responsibilities even more on Kirill. I think he's capable of living up to it. For Toronto, I really didn't have to think about this one too much either. It is Mitch Marner. There are times that people will say, well, you're hard on Marner. You're hard on Marner. I'm not as hard on Marner as many. When he was having problems scoring goals in the playoffs, I didn't think that was on him, because he's not, he scores goals, but that's not primarily his role. And I think in the playoffs, he's more of the setup guy. And so if you're relying on him for goals, that's an issue right there. I think you should be looking at the guys on his line and why isn't it working out? What kind of passes is he making? And honestly, his passing game is fantastic. So Marner would be my pick for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I do have a Marner jersey, and I don't know if it's close in terms of favorites on the Toronto Maple Leafs. I like Matthews as a player. I think as a 60-goal scorer, yep, he can do it every year. But Marner's the player that's my favorite. Boston, this one too. It has to be Bergeron. Can't be anybody but Bergeron. If you see a video of me and I'm talking about my favorite Boston Bruins, if I mention my all-time favorite Bruin is Cam Neely, cool. If I'm talking about current Boston Bruins and I don't say Bergeron's my favorite, I have been replaced like body snatchers, okay? And you guys should be alarmed, because it's Bergeron. It should always be Bergeron, and the moment it's not Bergeron is the moment that I have been replaced by a pod person. And that's alarming. You should immediately go out and buy as much toilet paper as possible. Edmonton, I went with a player that, I think his work ethic is high. And the reason that I went with Draisaitl, he's a better two-way forward than he gets credit for. He's not going to, confuse anybody with Bergeron in terms of his defensive ability. But I think he's better than he gets credit for. And he's a lot of fun to watch. McDavid's the best player in the league. McDavid does a lot of special things. But for me, I get a kick out of watching Leon out there. And I don't think the difference between McDavid and Draisaitl in terms of overall play and as a player, I don't think it's that huge. McDavid's the better player. But I think they're close. Carolina's a pretty obvious one, too. I think Jacob Slavin's been my favorite Canes player for a long time. And again, if I got a Canes jersey with a current player on the back, it's Slavin. One of the better defensive defensemen in the National Hockey League. We can have the debate about whether or not he's the best at some point in time, I guess. But Slavin is really quite the excellent defensive defenseman. And he does have a little bit of offense in there as well. This past couple of years, he's looked like he wants to score some more points and some more goals. And kudos to him, because it doesn't seem to be at the expense of his defensive game. Add in the fact that he does not take penalties as a defensive defenseman, and he's kind of a unicorn, right? It's very rare that you see that. So Slavin to me is kind of a special talent. For the Jets, again, I don't even have to look at the paper. And I really shouldn't when it comes to favorite players, right? Kyle Connor's my favorite Winnipeg Jet. This past season was fantastic. I think he can do that every year. The potential's there. Obviously, honorable mention to Nick Ehlers. Honorable mention to Josh Morrissey as well. But Kyle Connor is my favorite member of the Jets. A few years ago, it would have been Scheifele, but now that I watch the Jets as much as I do, it is Kyle Connor. Again, Ehlers isn't far off. For the Seattle Kraken, it could have been Donskoy. It's not Donskoy, because there's a player who came up and played, and he is already my favorite member in Seattle, and that's Matty Beniers. Matty Beniers fit in so seamlessly towards the end of the season. I loved every game he played. I loved his two-way play. He came back. I was like, he's back-checking. This is ridiculous. He's such a good two-way player, which is what the scouting report said about Matty Beniers when he was drafted. That he was going to be an excellent two-way center. He may never be a superstar scoring 100 points. He could. The potential's there, but his game really is that two-way game. And when you're a team starting out, having that two-way center who's kind of elite at being a two-way center, that's a fantastic way to start things off. So to me, Beniers is my favorite member of Seattle. Now, I've kind of told you guys which way I'm going with Vancouver, because Vancouver's not easy. I have a lot of player jerseys for the Vancouver Canucks of current players and former players as well. But to me, it's still Horvat. Now, Brock Besser, obviously, I have a lot of fun with Brock Besser and saying his name and doing the whole, like Paul Heyman does when he does the introduction for Brock Lesnar in WWE. Um, but jokes aside, Horvat is my favorite. He had 31 goals this past year, and yet I read a scouting report that said Horvat's looking to bounce back from a down year points wise. Okay, his points per game, I think he had 52 points in 70 games. He had 31 goals. There's no bounce back. He had 31 goals. What's he bouncing back from? Not scoring enough assists? Yeah, Horvat is a pretty solid player. He is their captain, and I have nothing but respect for Horvat. And he reminds me in some ways of Stan Smyl. Stan Smyl was not a player who had a ton of points in an era where a lot of guys did. He went out there, he did his job, he did it well. He was the captain of the team. Quiet at times as well, and I've seen that complaint about Horvat. Yeah, there were times where Smyl was kind of quiet as well, but Smyl knew when to step up, and I think Horvat does too. So while there's a lot of Canucks I could have picked, I'm picking Horvat. For Nashville, I almost picked Jeannot. I did, and Yossi still keeps that spot, but Jeannot was a lot of fun to watch this past season. Jeannot hits everything that moves, and he can score, and he can fight. But I'm going to go with Yossi, a defenseman who really made people think he could hit 100 points because he legit can. Yossi's an absolute beast out there. And so, yeah, he, as my favorite member of the Nashville Predators, pretty sure he was there last time as well. Although Arvidsson was my favorite Pred not too long ago. So moving on to New Jersey. Honorable mention to Jack Hughes, but Sharon Govich. Sharon Govich, the work ethic was there before this past season, and now this past season showed the scoring would be there as well. So he's scoring, he's playing well. Very, very impressed with Sharon Govich as a player. The work ethic, again, when I see a player who has that work ethic, that every shift they're prominent for the right reasons, and then later on in their career, that scoring touch shows up as well, and it's happened with Mangiapane, it's happened with Andrew Kopp. And it's happened with various players, Arvidsson being another one. And it is so much fun to see these players who have that work ethic getting those points. And Sharon Govich, another example of that. For the Washington Capitals, I went with, and he hasn't played a game for them yet, and I apologize. But out of Ottawa, it's Connor Brown. And I hope Connor Brown plays as well for the Caps as he has for the Ottawa Senators. Because honestly, Connor Brown, very, very talented player. Strong penalty killer, very strong penalty killer, and I think the Caps fans are going to like his game quite a bit. So Connor Brown is my pick for the Washington Capitals. I apologize, I know he hasn't played a game for the team yet. I don't think he's the only one on this list that's with a new team either. So, but again, Brown, that's bringing my fandom over from Ottawa to the Washington Capitals and hoping that works out. Ironically, I'm just thinking about it, and yeah, my favorite Ottawa player hasn't played a game for Ottawa yet either. For Vegas, I don't think this has changed in the entire time they've been in Vegas. William Karlsson. It's just William Karlsson. I know the points totals aren't where they were that first year. I know the goals totals. I know he won't get back to 40 goals. But I love William Karlsson's effort. Really, really good two-way forward. And as I've said, since seeing him live in Vegas, a couple of games I watched with him there, I was like, okay, I would take that player on any team I cheer for. He's fantastic. And I don't believe he scored in either game. It was just his board work, his intelligence as a defensive player, and how well he played offensively. I'm a big Karlsson fan. With Buffalo, there were a couple of ways I could have gone, but I went with a former member of the Vegas Golden Knights, Alex Tuch. I thought Tuch had his best year this past year for Buffalo. He changed their offense when he got there. And so, yeah, Tuch, I found myself cheering for him in a way I didn't when he played for Vegas. But there were times when Vegas was watching him. He was beating Vancouver or beating Dallas, beating other teams I cheer for. And now he's in Buffalo, where Buffalo doesn't beat teams as much. So, anyways, maybe that changes this year with Tuch there the full season. Obviously, Krebs had a good run with them too. So, yeah, Tuch would be my favorite member of the Sabres. Anaheim. Another player that hasn't played a game with the team yet. So that'll be the comment in the comment section. There usually are comments in the comment section. How can that be your favorite member of that team? Because he hasn't played there yet. Being my favorite player doesn't change when you change teams. And in Frank Vetrano's case, I have been a huge vocal supporter of his since he was in Boston, through his time in Florida, through his time with the Rangers, and now into Anaheim. And I don't understand why Vetrano bounces around the way he does. It's just that's what's happening. And so hopefully he sticks with Anaheim, because if he moves again, we have to call him a journeyman at that point. I don't think he's there yet, but yeah, that fifth team does kind of make you a journeyman, especially this early in your career. So I like Vetrano. I like how well he works. There are other players in Anaheim I like quite a bit. It is an ongoing conspiracy against me by the Anaheim Ducks organization that I didn't like the Ducks when the channel started up, and clearly management took that to heart and they decided to bring in players that I like, and I don't like it. Pittsburgh does the same things. They bring in players that I like quite a bit, and I'm kind of offended by that. So, yeah, Vetrano for Anaheim. For Detroit, another player who hasn't played a game there yet. What is wrong with stupid hockey guy picking guys who haven't played a game there yet? Andrew Kopp. So, honorable mention to a guy like Seider, honorable mention to Nedeljkovic, but Andrew Kopp, man. I hope Kopp keeps up what he was doing last season. I hope he can maintain that point production. I really do. And yet I get the feeling that there may be a bit of a clawback in his production. I think he might have produced a little too much this past year, but I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I think Andrew Kopp is another example of a player who worked really hard to get his minutes, and then when he got his minutes, he made them count. He made sure that he scored during those extra minutes he was getting. So nothing but respect for Kopp. Philadelphia, I had some issues with Philadelphia. They weren't the toughest, though. We'll get to the toughest. But Sean Couturier, who had a rough year, injuries took him out for most of the season. Hopefully Couturier can be healthy this season. I think that would make a huge difference for the Philadelphia Flyers. Because while people talk about injuries and teams like Vegas and Montreal and others and how that affected them, it absolutely affected Philadelphia too. Just that they were key injuries. And it was, you lose Couturier. That's your top two-way forward. And a guy who changes the game when he's out there. Plus, you brought in Ryan Ellis. He's out too. So it's not just the amount of injuries. It can be that key guy in that key position. And so hopefully Couturier is healthy. Same for Ellis as well, who would get an honorable mention as one of my favorite players, even though he barely played for Philadelphia. So apologies. For Calgary, I don't have to look at the paper for Calgary because I know it's Chris Tanev. Hey, Chris Tanev, hard worker, never takes a shift off, gets hit in the face with the puck, no big deal. He's going to be on the IR to start the season. He'll probably be back before we expect him to be. So if he's supposed to be out for a month, he'll be out for 2 weeks. If he's supposed to be out for 4 months, he'll be out for 2. He has that warrior mentality. You can tell by the number of teeth. So when you've got a defenseman that number of teeth is low, that tells you his compete level's pretty high. So yeah, Tanev for the Flames. For the Rangers, I went with there were a few. But I copped out. Yep. Chickened out, took Shesterkin. Because I have been a very vocal supporter of Shesterkin as well. And he's a fantastic goaltender. He makes saves that you have to kind of rewind and go back and see how he did that. How did that happen? How? How did he save that? And he is not really a throwback, but it feels like he is getting us back to a time when we had one goaltender that was just better than the other goalies. Hasek. Hasek was just better than the other goalies. We had to kind of wonder at what he was able to do. And I say that because he would make saves he had no business making. His stats were absolutely ridiculous. And I get the feeling Shesterkin, his career could go the same way, which bodes well for the New York Rangers because Hasek did eventually win a Stanley Cup. And so Shesterkin might be not that far away from a Stanley Cup. The Rangers did make it to the Final Four this past spring. Arizona. Nick Schmaltz. Has to be. I've been a fan of Schmaltz's since he was in Chicago. Never understood why he was traded as he was to Arizona, and I'm glad he's still in Arizona. I'm glad they gave him some money, and he's sticking around there. I think Schmaltz gives you an honest effort every night, and his offense, I think, is somewhat underrated at this point. The LA Kings. I'm sure there's Kings fans saying, he's not going to pick Arvidsson, is he? Because he mentioned Arvidsson with the Preds. Yeah, I'm going to pick Arvidsson. I've been a fan of Arvidsson's for a long time. And again, it's a matter of staying healthy for Arvidsson. I think he's kind of a cinch for 25 goals if he's healthy all season. I'd say 25 goals is at the low end. I think he can hit 30. But that's me, right? And as a fan of Arvidsson's, may not be completely objective when I say it. I am rooting for him to do quite well, and hopefully that's the case for him with the LA Kings this season. He had a good first season. We'll see how the second season goes. Honorable mention to Philippe Danault, who also had an amazing first season in LA. St. Louis, don't eat the paper. Now, in the honorable mention category, Kyrou. Probably Thomas as well, but it's Krug. Because, yeah, it's Torrey Krug. I have a Krug jersey, a Krug Blues jersey. I was sad when he left Boston, but I still like him a lot. He's a good offensive defenseman. Don't overplay him. Don't expect a great defensive defenseman. And I think you're in good shape. And so far in St. Louis, I think he's done well. Hoping that, again, full health, all that other fun stuff. And, yeah, all the best for Torrey Krug. For Colorado, see, this is one of those times where it is the best player on the team because Cale Makar. Makar is a special defenseman. And while I talked about Shesterkin being a level above other goaltenders and how we could see him, I would say if Shesterkin has another year like he just had, we will be talking about him as, you know, one of the best goalies of this generation pretty quickly. Makar, as soon as I heard the Bobby Orr comparisons, there were two things I did. First off, I groaned. No one can be compared to Bobby Orr. Bobby Orr has this legendary status that nobody should be compared to Orr. But I understood at the same time why people were saying he was the best defenseman they'd seen since Bobby Orr. Bobby Orr could score 150 points and still play really, really well in his own end. Makar seems to have some of that same energy, where he could score over 100 points and still play really, really well in his own end, which is not easy. Most of your high-scoring defensemen, in most cases historically, are defensemen that don't necessarily play that great in their own end. That has changed in that we now have Hedman. Fox is another one that can play both ends of the rink, and you've got Makar, and you've got Yossi, who's a beast. So these are defensemen that it is really, really difficult to find a weakness with. And with Makar, I don't know that there is one. And if you pointed out a weakness, within a week he turned into his greatest strength, and you'd regret mentioning anything. So, yeah, there's that. For the Sharks, Logan Couture. Veteran forward. Really what won me over with Couture is the fact that if you can get hit in the face with a puck and you lose teeth and your jaw's wired shut and all that fun stuff, and you're like, yeah, no, I want to go out and play hockey, just put that fishbowl thing on me, I'm going out on the ice. Nothing but respect from me. I would at least need to take a nap or just have a little bit of a break, but Couture's like, it's just my face, it's fine, I'll be good, I'm going back out on the ice. It's not my arms, it's not my legs, I can still play hockey. Couture is a warrior, and he is one of those guys that for San Jose management might be looking at and say, you know what, as long as we've got guys like Couture, Meyer, Hurdle, we have a chance. And maybe that's what they're thinking with the no rebuild talk that they've been doing throughout the summer. So yeah, Couture, absolutely fantastic veteran forward, and I've been a fan of his for a long time. For Columbus, a player who had an up and down season, hopefully he has a better year this year, and that'd be Jack Roslovic. I like Roslovic quite a bit. I had expected a little more out of him in Columbus than we saw this past season, but I still think he can turn it around, and I think he can be not the top center, because the top center is going to have to be able to potentially play between Goudreau and Laine, and I don't know that's going to work for Roslovic. I think Sillinger's going to get a shot at that job. I think they'll at least in the preseason go, let's put Sillinger in the middle and see what happens, because then you got a good, exciting young line there. But Roslovic, good hard worker, and a fan of his since his days in Winnipeg, and so he would be my favorite Columbus Blue Jacket. Ottawa, a player who hasn't played a game for them yet. But, man, I've been a fan of DeBrincat's since before he started playing in the National Hockey League. That has never changed, and it's not changed now. I'm looking forward to seeing how he plays in Ottawa. I hope it's a seamless transition. I'm hoping for, I'd say, 30 goals. Now, I know he had 40 last year, but he's not playing with Patrick Kane anymore. So hopefully we see him in the 30-plus range. And if you do, Ottawa's going to be quite happy with that, because they've already got Norris, who should be a 30-goal forward again. You've got Brady Tkachuk, who may very well be a 30-goal scorer as well. I only paused because I don't want to say Matthew by accident. Almost did. So there are some scorers now in Ottawa This is not going to be a pushover of a team any longer, and DeBrincat could really help bring their legitimacy to the fore. For Chicago, I had a tough time with Chicago. Not going to lie, they've gotten rid of so many players I like. They got rid of Hagel, they got rid of DeBrincat, they got rid of Fleury. So I don't, I'm kind of torn on this. So I thought, why not pick Taylor Radish, who came over from Tampa Bay in the Hagel deal and looked pretty good in Chicago. This is a Chicago team we know has been stripped down. We know that the plan is to go through this rebuild, so it's not as sexy of a roster as it was. Honorable mention here too to Caleb Jones, who I thought had a solid season. But Taylor Radish, I thought played well after that trade from Tampa. He'll get an increased ice time in Chicago, obviously, a better opportunity, and maybe Radish will be part of the solution too for Chicago eventually, right? He's not that old by NHL player standards, so hopefully for Radish, this is a chance for him to blow up, as well as Tkachuk. Tkachuk could end up being quite the pickup for him too. I really think that trade was a smart one for the Chicago Blackhawks, right? For now and for the future. And last but not least, the New York Islanders. And for the Islanders, I remembered, so the last Canucks game before we had the pause in 2020, I went to see the New York Islanders against Vancouver. I was blown away with Barzal's skating ability. I was blown away by Barzal's stick handling. And though I don't think he had a point in that game, he might have had a point, but it really wasn't like it was a dominant game for him. But Matthew Barzal was spectacular. And so he would be my favorite member of the New York Islanders. It does change when you see a team live, thus the William Karlsson for Vegas. To me, it changes things when you see a team live. It's part of the reason I like to go and watch hockey games live. It's different than watching it on TV for obvious reasons. And for me, I try to watch the guys away from the puck too. So I watch that work ethic away from the puck, and Barzal was one of those guys who impressed me. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, as always, including, hey, give me your favorite player on each team if you want to do that as well. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And as I said at the start, favorite player does not mean best. So if you're looking at this board here and you're saying, well, that's not the best player on that team. Yeah, I know. It's my favorite player on that team. And those two things don't have to be the same. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts. As always, hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.